Chapter 2. KOBO was the first radio station in this empty area south of Austin, Texas. The locals all called the station Cabo. Either that, or they called it an eyesore. Unlike the other businesses and quaint shops in the town square that updated their front window decor with the seasons, KOBO supported a massive 50-foot tall metal antenna right in front of the shop window. No one in St. Farr liked that the only part of town that you could see from a few miles out was the huge metal obelisk that overshadowed every other structure. From the time she was 5 years old, Pat would help her father plow, plant, and harvest cotton in the small field that surrounded their home in the outskirts. Even as a small child, Pat couldn't find anything exciting about working the field. No imaginary game or story she told herself about what she was doing out there would counteract the Central Texas solar rays or the brittle poking of sun-dried cotton bushes. Pat would work the fields with her father every morning when the crops were in season. They would sweat and toil away hours at a time, doing their best to ensure their small part of the American dream would stay alive and produce enough to cover the cost of living until they were able to till and plant again. The Biederman plot of land was far out in the outskirts, well outside the fertile soil that helped the original wagon train settlers survive their first several years in St. Farr. The plot was small, and Pat's father was forced each year to beg one of the fellow St. Farrians to include his harvest with theirs because his crop wouldn't meet the minimum purchase weight set by those who deal with St. Farr exports. Not only did he need to ask for permission to add his small batch to theirs, he also needed to trust that they would pay him the appropriate percentage of that total sale. Living harvest to harvest, paycheck to paycheck, with no transparency into the deals or distribution you rely on, could sow distrust in anyone. But Pat's father did all he could to keep her away from the anxiety of the business. The work on the farm hardened her hands, but not her heart. Once Pat and her father finished their morning labor, he would take her directly to school. Her dad saw the value in getting an education and tried his best to ensure she could learn and grow with the other kids her age. Parents in St. Farr always tried to be the best parents they could, and Pat's dad was no exception. Pat gained a reputation among the other children in school as someone to be avoided. She always arrived at the 12-room school, drenched in sweat, smelling of musk and mud. Her clothes were always dirty. Her hair was always knotted. She was always confused about the lessons because she would miss most of Miss Melton's explanations. She wasn't picked on, just ignored, and left to fend for herself. That treatment from kids her age is enough to saddle anyone with enough anxiety and loneliness to crush a bright soul. Pat was not crushed. She embraced her alone time and soaked up as much information as she could during her time in the underfunded St. Farr school system. After a long day of work at school, Pat and her dad would turn on their radio. Her small, sore fingers would slowly dance along the dial as they sat, hungry, and tried to pick up faint traces of a broadcast from Austin or San Antonio. Occasionally, on a clear night, they could catch the static masked tail end of the news from the day, or, if they were extra lucky, an adventure story. Those nights without food, laying in front of a static-filled radio, embedded the importance of public broadcasting in her bones. When she grew up, she had no choice but to start KOBO. Unlike most of the unfortunate souls born and raised in St. Farr, Pat was what people called a go-getter. Not only did she personally broadcast a daily radio show from the KOBO office, she also managed the playlist that ran during her hours away from the mic. When she wasn't at the station, she worked hard to get federal and state grants to improve the town. Pat had secured funding for the St. Farr Public Park, a small plot of land just outside of town square. The park had a large cement pad, 6 wooden picnic tables, a wooden gazebo, a small swing set, and 1 baby swing and 2 swings for the older kids, and 1 poorly rendered 6-foot-tall statue of Ferris the Flamingo. It wasn't much, but it was infinitely more than St. Farr had when Pat grew up there. Of all those who lived in St. Farr, Pat was the happiest to still be there. She loved her work at the radio station. She loved knowing everyone in town. She loved pushing the community forward and making positive change in the town that gave her so little. In short, she loved St. Farr. Small towns are always filled with secrets, cliques, and endless bands of gossip. And the huge, ugly radio tower was not the only reason St. Farians talked about Pat behind her back. Most of the town had two unanswered questions about Patty Biederman. How does she make money? And why is she still listening to the Backstreet Boys?